Hi, welcome to Titan Reloading. My name is Michael, and today I'm going to be discussing how I set up my Lee Precision reloading dies on the press for reloading. I will be using the Mech Marksman press right here in the demonstration. I will cover the dies, the function, and things that you're going to want to look out for when you're setting up your dies to reload with them. So without much further ado, let's get started. So the first die we have is the rifle full-length sizing die. As you've probably guessed by the name of the die, the purpose is to size your brass from the neck all the way up at the top down to just above the base. The way that it accomplishes it is the inside of the die is going to push down on the brass case until it is at the proper diameter. Because there is a lot of friction associated with the full-length sizing process, you are going to want to lube these cases before you attempt to size them. I would suggest lubing from just below the shoulder all the way down to just above the base. Make sure that when you are lubing that you use a light or good amount. It is important that you don't use too much lube because there have been cases where the lube actually stops the brass from being able to go all the way up in the die. Not to mention, if too much lube gets up to this upper portion here around the shoulder, it can actually cause it to put a dimple in the shoulder, which is definitely not what you're going to want to have happen. As you can see, the way that this die operates for the case mouth is the EZX expander bulge right here, which may not be the easiest to see in the video. It opens up the case mouth on its way out of the die. So you insert it, squeezes it down. As you're pulling it out, it's going to hit the expanding bulge right here, open it back up, and then it is sized. Because of that, it is a pretty decent idea to put a little bit of lube on the tops of the bullets, on the case mouth, just to help lubricate that EZX expander, but that is the sizing die. So this here is the 223 full-length sizing die. To set this up on the press, what you're going to want to do is run the ram up to the top of the stroke and screw down the full-length sizing die until it comes into contact with the shell holder. At that point, you're going to want to back off the ram and advance it about a quarter of a turn and then lock your locking ring in place. What this does is ensure that you're getting good solid contact with the shell holder and the die to make sure that you're sizing your case as much as you can. It is also important that you monitor the EZX expanding pin that's in the middle. What can happen is if that gets backed out too far, the brass will attempt to be squeezing down the case neck and opening it up at the same time, and it will not allow the brass to pass through, and it'll actually buckle your case. But the full-length sizing die is definitely the easiest one to set up, as you have probably seen right here. So the next dies that I will be discussing are the short and the long charging die. The short charging die, the one on the left, is the die you're going to want to use for your shorter cases. So 223 and shorter, which is 1.76 inches for case length or shorter, is what you're going to be using that die for. The long charging die, or the one on the right, you're going to use for anything taller than a 223. It is important to say taller than a 223 because most of your 223 cases are going to be just too short in order to work on that, as the cutoff for that die is the maximum length for a 223. So your cases would have to be the absolute maximum that it could be in order to work for 223. Okay, so getting the die set up, what you're going to need to do is to get the threading started. And for 223 with the short charging die, you will find you don't have to thread it in very far before you can start seeing some actuation. So if you watch over here, it's already starting to push up, and it is barely threaded on there. What you're looking for when you are using the auto drum powder measure is watching this linkage part here, this square, and you're going to want that to push up to where it is just barely below that. There. And you're going to advance it a little bit further and a little bit further until it is getting up to maybe 1/8 of an inch from actually contacting there. And that is going to be where you're going to want to set it and then lock the locking ring into place. So I will emphasize, when you're setting up the short charging die for 223 or cases that are similar in length to the 223, it will look like the die is not in nearly far enough, but it is the proper setup depth. There will probably be 3 or 2 threads holding it in place, and that is all you need. If you advance it further than that, what can happen is there will be too much force between the powder measure die and your brass case, and it will cause the brass case to collapse in on itself. So you're definitely going to want to monitor the setup to where it is just barely, like just a sliver between those 2 points. So yeah, just to make sure that I show this here, again, where you want it set up for that spacing. And when I pull this die out, the distance between the lock ring and the bottom of the die is the amount of distance that you have doing 223 with this die. I have used it for reloading 223s in the past, and it works perfectly fine. But it will seem like there's not enough die there. So the 2 bullets that I'm going to be using in the demonstration for the bullet seating setup is going to be the Hornady 22 cal 68 grain bow tail hollow point and the Sierra 69 grain hollow point bow tail. You can already tell by looking at the 2 bullets in the video that even though they're only 1 grain off, the shape of the bullet is pretty different. The Hornady bullet is a longer bullet with a skinnier tip to it, where the Sierra is a much shorter, fatter tip. This is going to affect the bullet seating setup for it, as the depth is going to be a little bit different. I do have some Sierras already loaded up, as you can probably see in the back here. So I will demonstrate how you can easily prepare yourself in the future. And then I will also show how you would initially get started with the bullet seating. All right, so this is the Lee rifle bullet seating die. I will mention right away that this is based on the crimping seating die. As you can tell right here, it does make contact with the case and the bullet. It is important to note that there are 2 different bullet seating dies, a dead length bullet seating die and a taper crimp bullet seating die. This one happens to be a picture of the crimping one. But the way that this works, the die body is of course going to be holding the relative position of everything. Then there are the adjustment knob and the bullet seating stem. The bullet seating stem is free floating, and what it does is it centers itself over the bullet, and it goes off of the ogive of the bullet, not the tip of the bullet, because the tip, due to manufacturing, can be very inconsistent, and in transport, it can bounce around in the box and kind of deform it a little bit. So to ensure that you're getting the same seating depth, they go off of this portion here, as it is the most consistent area to go off of. And of course, as you probably would have gathered by the title, the depth seating adjustment knob here is what you will turn up and down to get the actual bullet seating depth that you are attempting to achieve. All right, so now for setting up the die itself. The majority of your bullet seating dies are going to be dead length bullet seating dies. And what that means is it does not crimp. It does not come into contact with the brass to force it into the bullet. All it does is seat it. The easy way to identify that is the knurled ring that goes around the top of the die is a good show that it is a dead length bullet seating die, but it doesn't hurt to set it up this way just to make sure. So what I'll do is screw the die down until it comes into contact with the shell holder. And again, I'll advance it just a little bit to make sure that it is getting solid contact. And with a dead length bullet seating die, that's what you do. If you are using a bullet seating die that can also crimp, you would want to adjust it either by backing it out a little bit to make sure that it does not crimp, or by advancing it further to get the amount of crimp that you want. But from this point, what we'll do is put a bullet on there, run it up, and screw down the adjustment knob until it basically stops itself. From here, it's going to be trial and error, where you are going to mic the overall length to see what you have, and then advance the adjustment knob in order to get it to the depth that you're looking for. So right now, and this is going to be obviously far too long, we are at 2.526. So I'm going to put it in, and I will advance this one full turn, run it up. And again, you'll see that this is going to be far too long to be using, but now it is 2.469. And we could probably do a few more full turns here. Pull it out, double check, 2.359. Again, far too long for a case overall length for a 223, especially if you're trying to fit it in an AR-15 mag. About the tallest you want it to be there is 2.269, but even I usually aim for 2.25 just to be safe. But this part is largely trial and error until you get the proper seating depth. But now I'm much closer. The last one was 2.4. And there we go. That's where I want to be. So this is where I would just keep the adjustment knob for my reloading. And it's pretty much as easy as that when you're setting it up. A lot of trial and error. And you do want to make sure that when you are getting closer to your desired depth that you are being a little slower with how much, or a little less aggressive, I guess would be a better term, into how you are adjusting the knob up here, as you can always push a bullet further in, but in order to back it out, you have to pull the bullet and start all over. So definitely a good idea to do it a little bit easier once you start getting closer. So I've loaded up all of the Sierra bullets that I have to load, and I'm kind of curious. I have a spent or an extra beat up case here. I wonder how close the bullet seating depth of the Hornady does come out compared to the Sierra. So let's just put that in there. The seating depth that I was doing with the Sierras was 2.255. This one comes out to 2.261. So again, in my AR mag, that is just a little bit too tall. So I wouldn't want to use that. Now, the other way that you can set these up is if you already have in the past, you set up a dummy bullet, So this here is my dummy round. The difference is going to be there's no powder or primer in this bullet. All it does is keep the distance between the bottom of the case and the bullet for future reloading sessions. So you just run this up, you screw down the knob until it stops itself, and then you check and see where you are at. Run it up. Ooh. 2.255, exactly where I want to be. So as you can tell, having a dummy round set up is going to quicken your bullet seating by quite a bit. I will stress, however, to double check and make sure that the overall length is what you expect, and that it does come out just right, because there might be situations where the knob gets turned in storage or something crazy like that, where you're going to want to make sure you are getting the appropriate bullet seating depth. All right, so this is the Lee Rifle Factory Crimp Die. The only thing this die does is squeeze the case mouth onto the bullet up here at the top. And the way that it works is the shell holder pushes on a die sleeve. So this is separate from the rest of the die body. And when it reaches the top, these angular lands are going to force it inward onto the case and the bullet, effectively crimping it in place. Okay, so for the setup on the Lee Factory Crimp Die, what you're going to want to do is, again, get it started in the press, run the ram up all the way to the top of the stroke, and just screw the die down until it stops itself on the shell holder. With the Factory Crimp Die, you are then going to want to advance a half turn and then lock it in place with the locking ring here. And this is going to give you a relatively light crimp, which is all you're going to really need for your semi-automatics. I would definitely keep it at the half crimp point unless you are going to visually inspect what the crimp looks like. But just to give you an idea, the first time my dad had set up for 223, he had followed the instructions, and when he used the Factory Crimp Die, he didn't feel anything, and he thought that he should feel it crimping. So he kept advancing the die further down until he had noticed that the overall length had grown by about 3/10 of an inch. And let me see how close I can get this. This one here, I'll just see if I can put a picture of it. But the one on the left, that is the result of just continuously advancing that Factory Crimp Die, expecting to feel the Factory Crimp Die at work, where the one on the right is much closer to what you actually want the end result to look like. So if you're using the Factory Crimp Die expecting to feel anything, you probably won't. So that has been how I set up my Lee rifle reloading dies. Again, we covered the dies, what they do, how they do it, and the setup for the dies. If you found this video to be helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or you have any tips yourself that can help other reloaders, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Michael, and as always, happy reloading.